completely 100% honest.
This is actually kind of the first time I've been honest. Besides being honest, you know, my attorney, even that, I haven't been completely honest with them.
Your mom's dead, okay? Now, what I want to ask you is, your mom's passed away, okay? And she's deceased, all right? Now, what I want to ask you.
She taught me how to be a good liar, a very good liar, without any conscience.
It's not a path to go down.
If anything, I don't tell lies.
With my mother, I could lie and think nothing of it.
I only use the one card that I have over you.
She now doesn't have a language beyond manipulation and retaliation.
It just feels good to be honest.
That's why
She taught me how to be a good liar.
I asked, what is the difference between Munchausen by proxy and just a grifter family who this is the con that this part of the family is doing? And his answer to me was, in a court of law, not a damn thing. Those are the most bullshit terms ever given to any diagnosis ever. By calling it things people don't freaking understand the names of, we've also absolved the abuser of being the abuser. So if you call it medical child abuse, it becomes very damn simple. The why and the motivations fall away, and it all becomes, is this or is this not child abuse? And we can have that conversation about whether it's not or isn't.
Everyone except for Dan. Dan's the only one I'm not apologized to.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is that you are tuning in. This is Unapologetically me, featuring me. No special guest, just me. Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing today? I hope you guys have had a great week, great weekend. I hope you guys are ready for another video about Gypsy Rose Blanchard, because you guys, the rabbit hole runs so deep and I always seem to get stuck inside of it and cannot find my footing to get back out again. In the first video I did, I wanted to be sure that I covered the entire story as I understood it, looking at the facts and the evidence that were publicly known to be facts, leaving out any rumors, leaving out hearsay, what this person has to say and that person has to say, because sometimes that can muddy the waters and make it really difficult to see what is true and what is not true. I got all of my evidence and facts from reputable sources and from Gypsy herself.
I only use the one card that I have over you, Gypsy.
That being said, we can't necessarily trust everything that comes out of one person's mouth.
I could lie and think nothing of it.
When they have everything to gain. We talked about Munchausens Syndrome by Proxy and how it went undiagnosed in the case of DEE DEE Blanchard. But after some comments about this not necessarily being the case, I decided to dig a little bit further to understand why so many people felt so strongly that DEE DEE was not mentally ill at all. She was simply a con woman from a con family. In this video, I will go over more evidence that shows the master manipulation tactics that were used by Gypsy to set the plan to kill her mother in motion. But I will also be going into more of the lesser known information about the case, information that I personally cannot say are facts for certain, but that a woman who has been investigating this case for the last 7+ years says she can say are facts for certain. Many of you already know of her. I can tell by your comments. A woman from the Good Wives Network named Fancy Maselli.
Hey guys, I'm Fancy, and you're watching the Good Wives Network.
As always, this video is entirely my opinion based on facts and evidence as I understand them. This video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. You should always do your own research before forming your own opinion. I do appreciate you listening to my opinion, which will be in full at the end of the video. And please feel free to leave your opinions in the comment section down below. I just have to say, I'm not naive to the fact that there is still so much that I don't know. We only have one side to this story of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, and the only other person that knows the truth about what happened behind the closed doors of their home is DEE DEE, and she has taken that truth to the grave. You know the phrase, two can only keep a secret if one of them is dead? Well, that pretty much sums up the first several years of this story. I've been looking at the comments from that last video, and I decided that I would look a bit deeper into things. More is coming out every single day. That further adds to my opinion that Nicholas Godejohn deserves a chance at rehabilitation, at the very least. He certainly deserves his side of the story to be heard, because this is not just Gypsy's story. I think some individuals have that confused. Also, Gypsy is running all over the place telling her story, which makes it fair game. But like I just said, this isn't just Gypsy's story, and I don't consider myself a storyteller. I consider myself to be a voice for the voiceless. And when it comes to this case, the voiceless would be the man sitting in prison for a crime he was severely manipulated into committing, while the woman he loves is out partying and dragging him through the mud.
Gypsy Rose Blanchard celebrating her release from prison with a party.
Can't bring me down. I'm on a high right now. I'm living my best life, and y'all can't take that from me.
Nicholas Godejohn. There was a lot of evidence left out of Nick's first trial that would have helped his case. There was evidence left out of Gypsy's hearing that would have shown the extent of the grooming involved in the year or so before the murder that was done to Nick by Gypsy. Yes, I said grooming. We have to remember that Gypsy Rose took a plea bargain. That's why she got the time that she got. For those of you who do not know, what happens in a plea bargain is that the prosecution will offer up a deal in exchange for a guilty plea from the accused. This is often a win-win for both parties. Not only does the prosecution get a guilty verdict, but the accused often gets away with certain damning evidence not ever being in the public eye. To keep it simple, avoiding a trial keeps secrets from the public. Period. While both Nick and Gypsy have already been given convictions and cannot be tried again for these charges due to double jeopardy, there is a possibility that they can both be tried again on different charges. Nicholas Godejohn is currently working with his lawyer to get the charge of second-degree murder instead of his current charge of first-degree murder. It may not be possible for Gypsy to be charged with first-degree murder, but I am hopeful that Nick will be granted a new trial, because at the very least, more truth will come out about their relationship and about Gypsy and the things that she was up to prior to the murder. Now let's go over some of what I have found that adds to my opinion that the wrong person is being vilified in this case. I of course want to say that at the end of the day, Nicholas Godejohn took the full responsibility for stabbing DEE DEE to death. He never once denied his involvement, and his original interrogation confession adds up with the evidence. Nicholas Godejohn is guilty of murder, and he has been convicted of first-degree murder. The question is, does he deserve life without parole when the mastermind is free? Towards the end of my last video, I asked a question. That question was, who is more dangerous, the puppet who commits the act or the puppeteer who pulls all the strings? We can't go back in time. We can only move forward. And moving forward, Nick has some options. And it has become a goal of mine to spread awareness on the truth behind Nicholas Godejohn's part.
To overturn his conviction based on poor representation and a diminished mental capacity. Now he's hoping a panel of 3 judges will reconsider his conviction.
He's hoping to obtain a new trial. Mr. Godejohn was alleging that the only reason that he was found guilty in his jury trial was because he had ineffective assistance of trial counsel. His last trial, he argued that his mental state did not meet the requirements for first-degree murder, and so the jury should have only found him guilty of second-degree murder. If he were to get a new trial, then it would start all the way over, and there wouldn't be any previous finding of first degree or second degree. It would just have to go back to a new trial.
There have been many comments on my last video by people sharing the opinion that Gypsy was never abused, that she was in on the scam from the start, that Dee Dee didn't have Munchausen syndrome by proxy, and that she was just a scammer and a con artist, plain and simple. This is just my opinion, and I can certainly understand where the different opinions come from. But because the quote-unquote medical issues, whether they were fake or not, began when Gypsy was just 3 months old, and a baby cannot possibly understand what's going on, it is my opinion that the isolation and physical brainwashing done by Dee Dee to Gypsy Rose can be classified as abuse up until a certain point.
2009, the police are called out. They find out that she's got an ID that says she's over 18. She had an ID that said she was over 18, guys. And that none of the medical things are true, and they leave. She had every opportunity to walk out that door, but she didn't. And it's not because she was being abused, it's because she didn't want to, because she was still continuing on in the con. And at this time is when she starts to get heavily involved in a group called Vision Con. That's where she meets Dan.
It has been said that many of the surgeries that Gypsy had were actually necessary surgeries, but they were blown out of proportion and used as part of the con.
In Louisiana, the things that were done to her are mostly medically necessary, and I believe the rest of it was just fraud, which is what I believe the whole case is based on.
After 2011, there are no more medical records of any type of procedures, so therefore no more medical abuse could be proven.
2011, Kansas City asks for guardianship again. Now this is a different hospital asking for guardianship again. And guess what happens? Everything ends. No more medical fraud, no more nothing. She sees people for dental work and things, normal fucking things, you know, just the regular things that she has to be seen for. So in 2011, even if you believe that medical child abuse was part of this case, it all stopped and ended right there. All.
I do agree that at some point, Gypsy knew it was all a facade. When? I don't know.
To some degree, I knew it was a facade. However, I didn't know the malicious intent behind the facade.
It is more my belief that she realized that this was a sham and immediately began planning her escape.
When she starts to get heavily involved in a group called Vision Con, that's where she meets Dan, the 35-year-old. So she's 18 at 2009.
Only continuing to go along with certain things to keep her mother from knowing her plans. Basically placating Dee Dee. And this is probably around the time that Dee Dee's own health started to deteriorate and Gypsy was able to sneak around a lot easier. Her mother was sick. She was taking sleeping pills and sleeping more soundly more often, giving Gypsy more freedom. While Dee Dee was probably the epitome of a helicopter parent up until Gypsy was in her late teen years, her own health decline kept her from continuing this type of control. Again, that's just my opinion. Let's talk about Dan for a little bit, because I just brushed over him in the last video, but Dan is an important piece of this puzzle.
2011, there's an incident that goes down. I think she was caught with Dan before this at the convention, and I don't remember what the dates are on that. I'll have to go back and look. But in 2011 is when the whole thing goes down with, you know, she goes and she gets her and she goes over, walks over 3 blocks and goes to the hospital and all that shit happens. She walked home, guys. She walked home. She had an ID. It's in the files. I've seen it. I've talked about people talking about it. She had an ID that said she was over 18 and one that said she wasn't. And Dee Dee claimed statutory, but they all knew it wasn't about statutory. It's because Dan was a drug person and he has many convictions. And guess what? Dan was married with kids.
In fact, he testified at Nick's trial for the defense. And this is what he had to say. He said that he kept in contact with Gypsy via video chat. He says that Gypsy told him her mother made her stay in a wheelchair and had unnecessary medical treatment. He says that their relationship developed from friendship to a sexual relationship. They would send explicit videos to each other. He discusses how they role played occasionally. He referred to Gypsy as being shy and timid. He says he developed a taste of power exchange, role-playing from her. He says she would send nude photos, dressed up in costumes, and used various fictitious names. Dan Glidewell says he was injured and that Gypsy visited him while he was in the hospital. She told him she wanted to go to Arkansas and restart her life. And for those of you who didn't see my last video or don't remember or don't know, Dan was a man that Gypsy met at a sci-fi convention. And this was well before she was talking to Nick.
But there is evidence that she did not just meet Dan once. According to Dan's testimony at Nick's trial, he and Gypsy had been speaking for quite some time. He mentioned sexual relationships, which I don't know if anyone caught that, but that means that Nick Godejohn was not the person who took her V card.
That's the one who took her virginity.
There's even some speculation that Gypsy was still talking to Dan at the same time she was also talking to Nick. And there's even more speculation that she's still talking to Dan, even now.
So we've given you 2005, 2007, 2009, 2011, 2014, 2015. I don't know what happened that last week, but something went wrong. And I believe Dan the man is very much involved in that. And I don't think she ever wanted Nick. I think that these two, Dan the man and Gypsy Rose the con artist liar, hatched a plan to unalive Dee Dee. And she went and found her Patsy, Nicholas, and they said to put a plan in place. And I think that night it went really wrong.
I apologize to everyone. Everyone except for Dan. Dan's the only one I would not apologize to. Apparently she decided to just go with it. And screw it. Me, I actually held together until I learned that she didn't lie. I
know that 2 days before, Dee Dee had supposedly thrown her out. Maybe she had, I don't know. But there's a lot of questions here, guys.
Here's a post from someone talking about their experience with Gypsy. A couple of years back, Gypsy showed up at our door. We live right down the road from where she lived, late in the night, and begged my husband to give her a ride to Mercy ER to check on her boyfriend who had gotten beat up. My husband gave her a ride, and he said she talked about Hurricane Katrina and how they landed here, but she was walking and talking fine when she showed up at our door. She was wearing a long wig, and he remembers her childlike voice. My husband said she was frantic to go to Mercy, and now we wonder if this was a runaway attempt from her mother. My husband immediately recognized her from the pictures posted online and totally freaked out because they lived so close to us. Here's another post from someone else. I'm privy to one of the events you have posted near the end of your article about Gypsy frantically attempting to get to Mercy ER for a boyfriend that had been beaten up. The boyfriend in question was not Nicholas Godejohn, but a friend of mine. Gypsy made it to the hospital and was then brought to what was then my house. I can confide that she had an ID that stated she was 18 at the time. It was shortly after she had gotten there that her mother showed up and caused quite the scene, threatening my friend, who was suffering from multiple injuries, including a broken back, with legal action because Gypsy was a minor. And the reason she had different IDs was due to a mix-up in paperwork from Hurricane Katrina and missing records. The wig was blonde, she had no glasses, and I can also assure you that she walked. It's impossible to know how many men Gypsy was actually talking to at the time of her mother's murder. She refers to all of these people as friends, but they all appear to have been male friends. Is Dan the friend Gypsy talks about in her first interrogation after being caught?
Sweetheart.
My friend had, one of the people that had texted me, I had texted him that I was leaving home, and he texted me, and he's like, are you okay? People have been posting some stuff on Facebook, and I asked him what post, and unfortunately police came before I could even read what he was saying, so I guess he was trying to tell me something.
We do know that friend is a male because she refers to him as he, and we don't play the pronoun game on this channel. Does any of this matter? I believe it does. And that's because if she was talking to other men besides Nick in a sexual manner, then to me, that signifies even more that she was not in love with Nick. It certainly points more to the idea that she was just using him. None of the other men were going to go along with this plan that Gypsy wanted to go with. One of the first things that really pissed me off that she said on the Vile Files with Nick Vile from The Bachelor or Bachelorette is that she blames Nick because he never told her no.
Each one of my exes and even my husband is like, baby, if you would have asked me that question, if you would have said, hey, can you kill my mom to get me out of this situation? They would have said no. Nick did not say that.
But there is evidence on the contrary. We also can't forget that they were together for almost 3 years before Nick actually killed Dee Dee. It's not like they met and a month later he came and did this. There had to be some grooming involved.
She knew right away that I admitted straight out to the whole thing that I was not going to get involved with this no matter how much she tried to push me.
manipulation involved in order for Gypsy to get Nick to agree to this.
It was going to have to be a darker side of me of some form that I have never had the opportunity to explore.
She spoke about Nick introducing her to BDSM. After Dan's testimony, it's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Who introduced whom to BDSM? Because according to Dan, Gypsy had been role-playing with him before she had even met Nick. Another piece of evidence that has recently come out is a supplemental report from the Waukesha County Sheriff's Office from Detective Hancock. And if you don't remember, that's the guy who was interrogating Gypsy. In this report, it talks about a video that was found on Gypsy's cell phone.
Do you have a cell phone number?
No.
That she didn't have.
Did you ever have a cell phone that you played around on or anything like that? No? Okay.
That was addressed to Nick from Gypsy, calling him Sir. Gypsy appears in what looks like a black colored jacket with a red wig. In it, she states, "Hi, sir, this is Ruby, and I'm making this video as an introduction video." Gypsy admits Ruby is the most evil side of her. Gypsy stated in the audio/video that she likes to get into trouble, and she is not sorry when she gets caught. Gypsy stated her quote-unquote caring was broken, and she was not scared of law enforcement, but she would be scared of Nicholas's evil side. Gypsy stated she would do anything with Nicholas, to include murder, rape, and assault. Gypsy tells Nicholas if at any time a girl tried to be his girlfriend, she would kill them with pleasure, and there would be lots of gore and blood. Gypsy stated if a girl was trying to get with Nicholas for sex, she might allow it. But if the girl tried to get with him as a girlfriend, she would kill her, and they could kill her together. Gypsy goes on to say how if it were family members murdered, she would not be so brutal, and she would have to step back and let him handle it. Gypsy stated she would allow Nicholas to rape her at any time he wanted to, but not physically assault her. But she was okay with, quote, rough sex and rape sex, unquote. Gypsy talked about the romantic side of Ruby and how Ruby was not touchy-feely. However, Kitty, Candy, and Bella were the romantic sides of her. Gypsy stated in this audio/video she was very good at stealing and talked about how they could steal bigger things together. Gypsy talked about how she was very good at planning things. Gypsy said she liked to cause mischief and mayhem, but Nicholas would have to put her in charge of all the planning. Gypsy stated she comes up with, quote, very, very bad ideas, unquote. And then she referred to her bad ideas as robbery, rape, vandalism, and stealing vehicles. The remainder of the video, Gypsy talked about her and Nicholas bonding when they would finally be together. Other than the mentioned statements, there was nothing else of evidentiary value on the audio or video footage, but I would say that's enough, right? This is an example of the evidence that was not shown in Gypsy's hearing. There have been other people to come out and say that Gypsy was very manipulative during her stay in prison. This, of course, is just hearsay, but I think one person that we may be able to believe would be a girl by the name of Rachel Garlick. Rachel was very good friends with Gypsy in prison and was paroled before Gypsy was. Because they were so close, Rachel Garlick created a TikTok account where supporters of Gypsy could send messages through Rachel to Gypsy. Now, for some reason, Rachel herself was never able to visit Gypsy in prison after she was paroled. However, I told you their relationship was close, and it was close enough that Gypsy is actually the godmother of Rachel's children. Because of this, Rachel would send the kids and her husband to visit Gypsy in prison to continue to show support to her. Now, I mentioned that Rachel had a TikTok where people would support Gypsy through her. And there are records that show that the money that Rachel was making on social media was being sent to Gypsy to put on her books via JPay. So it wasn't as though Rachel was just making money off of Gypsy.
I am so excited for her to get out and live her best life. I hope to get to talk to her tomorrow though, but so excited. Everybody go to her page and give her the best of wishes.
But as it got closer to Gypsy being paroled, out of the blue, Gypsy just stopped any contact with Rachel, and this took her by surprise and hurt her deeply.
When she called a couple months ago, we totally worked things out. She invited me to her party, and then 2 days later, she uninvited me. I don't know why. I don't know what I did. And I'm just in the dark as everybody else. But I'm praying and hoping that she gives us time, because I felt like I've done nothing but support her and love her, even whenever I was not feeling like things were fair to me. But I can put all that aside because that's third-party opinions, and I think that's why this is happening. So, please stop asking me about her. And if you follow me just because of her, please just go follow her. I'd rather have my own followers, okay?
Without getting too much into this relationship, I just wanted to point out that this appears to be another manipulation of yet another person who trusted Gypsy. Gypsy needed Rachel. She needed the money. She needed the attention. She enjoyed all of these things. And when she got out, she didn't need Rachel anymore. So, see ya. Just like Nick, is my opinion, of course. I don't want this video to be anywhere near as long as the last one, so I'm going to acknowledge that there is so much more that we could get into, but I'd like to move on. So let's get into some messages from Nick to other people during this time that kind of back his claims, along with some text messages that I feel show that this was all Gypsy. That when she talks about her part, there really is no such thing as her part, in my opinion. The entire murder was her, with the exception of the quote-unquote act of the kill. These are Facebook messages from Nick to a couple other people where Nick talks about Gypsy and the plan to kill Dee Dee. He also talks about some other things. It seems like there's only one person he talks to that knows this plan, and that's these first messages I'm about to read you. So in this one, we have a person asking who changed their mind, and this would be in regards to the plan to kill Dee Dee. Nick responds, Gypsy did. The person says, okay, about killing her mom? Nick says yes. She says she wants to see how our original plan goes first, with me meeting her and her mom and such. And I guess she said she wanted to only do it as a last resort. Nick goes on to say, so I guess I'll be meeting her and her mom still first, before that idea was to ever happen. And that person then responds, okay. And this would be before they meet at the theater, you know, when they go see Cinderella and all that. So then Nick sends this message. I have to ask you something. How crazy do you think Gypsy is? You won't hurt my feelings or anything. I really want to know though, since I just obviously can tell she is. I just can't seem to put in words how crazy I think she is. This person then responds, well, I don't know how to put it into words either, but I will be honest. I would not ever kill my mom or anyone else unless they tried to kill me first. Then Nick says, yeah, I know. I suppose situations change people though, to where others are willing to do things that other people aren't. And obviously, my mom, even though she's been hard on me, overall, she's been a good mother to me. So I couldn't ever do it to her. And the only reason I can understand it with her mom is because how unreasonably poor her mom treats her. But since it is a last resort thing, who knows? Maybe it won't even have to happen. This person writes back, I suppose. Then we have these messages from April of 2015. Yeah, like I said, I'm different. And actually, you didn't see a side of me that the woman I am with now knows about. And it still didn't scare her off. It's called true love. Now, this is to someone different. So those first messages were to someone and these messages are to someone else. And I'm not going to read what that person responds because it seems personal, but you can pause to read it. Here, Nick says, yeah, well, me and the one I'm with are defying the laws of nature to stay together. It is as bad as can be. I won't tell you what I have to do to stay with her, but I'll do it if it means keeping her. Nick goes on to say, well, you don't understand how bad it really is for me. I mean, you may know a nugget of it, but not the full thing. Sorry, I can't share it. It must stay between me and her. The person responds again, and then Nick says, well, someone else's life is on the line, and that's all I can say. Sorry. It seems as though Nick is sharing this information almost like he wants someone to tell him not to do it. And it's not like it's this person's fault for not telling him that, but this person isn't saying not to do it. So it appears that Nick keeps pushing the issue. Like, do you really understand what I'm telling you? I'm hinting here that I have to do something that's not okay. Obviously, there is someone he was talking to that did know the whole deal, but that's not this person. Sorry if I'm confusing you guys. He says, believe me, you don't know what I'm talking about. Just keep it at that. And I can't say anymore. Then the person says, I'm not asking you to say anymore. I know what you're talking about. Nick says, tell me then, if you're so confident that you know. And then this person responds, and I don't want to make an asshole comment, but these fantasy conversations are a little weird. It's like this person's talking about stuff in fantasy, but Nick is actually talking about killing someone. And this person's over here talking about dragon rulers and Wicca and things like that. I think it might be safe to say that this person did not really believe that Nick was going to do anything. Certainly not stab a woman to death in her sleep. Nick goes on to say here, well, that's something completely different from what I'm experiencing and we'll have to deal with soon. See, you don't know what I'm talking about, but if it must stay between me and her, I guess it has to. You are in a whole different dilemma than me, but once I do what I must, I'll have to disappear from a place on earth, possibly for the rest of my life, and she'll have to come with me and leave all her past behind her. Again, I'm not reading the responses of this other person. You can pause to read them. He says, well, the one I am with is aware of that stuff too, but I can't say anymore. So I'm shutting up about what me and her must do in the future. And I'm going to leave this last message out because it's just this girl he's talking to saying things. And this isn't about her. But his response to her is this. Wow. And just to think, if we would have been together, you wouldn't have went down that path. The one I am with is aware of those things. However, I will have to do the unthinkable just to keep me and her safe. I must say, please never come around me. It's that I worry for the sake of him, not you. I wouldn't ever hurt you, even to this day, but what he sounds like he is putting you through makes me sad. Even though it does, I can't open up about my situation, even if I wanted to. In truth, I do, but I can't. As you know, me being a Taurus, the most loyal sign in the zodiac, if I say anything, I would betray myself as much as I would betray her, and I can't do that to her. And then he says this, I'll let you know. I hope you stay safe, even if you have to do things that are BDSM related. That's interesting. Moving on to June 9th of 2015. This is another person Nick is talking to. I think this might be the guy from the first messages, but I don't know. Anyway, this guy reaches out and he says, hey bro, how are you? And Nick responds, I'm all right, hoping to see Gypsy tonight. The person says, oh, I thought you were going to get her. And Nick responds, I am, but it takes time though. The person asked if Nick's at home right now, and Nick says, no, I'm in a hotel in Springfield. I just gotta get her. It will be early in the morning when I do. Then the person asks, is her mom all cool with everything at this point? And Nick responds, no, not really, because, well, she almost got kicked out of her mom's house. She only saved it because she still hasn't gotten done packing up her things. Since honestly, her relationship with her mom seems broken, since I guess those two argue every day. Then the person asked, how does she plan to get out of the house and to go home with you? And Nick says, well, you already know of her secret. She doesn't need her chair. She can walk, so she'll probably either just sneak out or something like that. And the person responds, oh, I see. And then he says, yep. However, if all else gets worse, I may have to get involved, which I'm prepared to do. The person says, interesting. And Nick responds, just as life is meant to be interesting. The person then responds, that is true. Just as I find these last few messages interesting. Of course, Nick could either be lying to this person, knowing he's actually going to kill DEE DEE, or he may still not have gotten the okay yet from Gypsy. Either way, it's clear to see Gypsy is running this show. If Gypsy says to do it, Nick is to do it. If Gypsy says not to do it, then Nick doesn't do it. It also shows that the only reason Nick is doing it is because he fears for Gypsy's life, as he says a few times. However, in this text message, Gypsy says kind of the same thing, but you can see that it's different. She says, bring your A game. Life with me is on the line. which in hindsight shows that her life isn't on the line if he doesn't do this. His life with her is on the line if he doesn't do this, meaning she is not going to be with him if he doesn't do this. I don't know, just pointing out what I see. Let's get into these text messages between Gypsy and Nick a little bit more deeply. I showed them all for context in my last video, but we're gonna actually break some of them down. In my last video, I talked about how I believe that sex was one of the biggest manipulation tactics that Gypsy used to get Nick to do whatever she asked him to do. There are way more text messages than what I'm about to show in this video, where these are the ones that I think are the most important for me to show what I'm trying to show. This one is from June 4th, 2015, so about a week before the murder. Nick texted Gypsy, "Good afternoon, sweetie," and she responds, "Oh my God, I had so many sex dreams of you last night." Nick says back, "Of all different kinds, dear?" "Yes, darling," Gypsy says. And Nick says, "Okay, sweetie." Gypsy responds, "Warning, I'm in a very sexual mood." Nick responds, "Honey, you could be in a top-notch sexual mood throughout our life together and it wouldn't bother me." Gypsy then says, "Good, darling, you're gonna need the energy." Then we have a text message from June 5th, 2015, from Gypsy. "Darling, what color restraints do you want? Black or pink?" This is in regards to BDSM. Nick responds, "Dear, we're collecting them, but get black, sweetie." Gypsy says, "Okay, darling." Let me just say, this entire conversation, every conversation in these texts is cringe. There's just no other word to describe it. It's cringy. Not any different from how Gypsy talks now when it comes to Ryan. I mean, the D is fire on a freaking post that 8 million people are going to read. If that's not cringe, I don't know what else is. Now, this is another message that I found to be very manipulating. This is Gypsy on June 6th, saying to Nick, "Honey, I was wondering, say I wanted to have sex with a guy before leaving town. Could I? It's just a curious question. LOL." Nick does not respond. She then says, "Okay, so I know you're territorial, but I'm being tempted sexually." She's still getting no response, so she then says, "Can we talk online, please?" And then she says, "I guess you're napping." Nick finally responds, and Gypsy says, "He agreed to meet up. We're going to get coffee at this cupcake place Thursday, so that will close that. It's a public place, so all good, hun." Nick says, "Dear, still, I told you I'll be around in the area of it to make sure he don't do anything, and you have to accept that." And then Gypsy says, "Okay, darling." Now, this is just my opinion, but it almost seems like she's throwing it out there to Nick that she has other options when she thinks Nick's not going to keep going along with this plan that she's throwing out there. You know, kind of like, hey, let me remind you, I can have sex with someone else. I could have a relationship with someone else. So you better get your shit together and do what I want. Again, that's just my opinion because I do believe that sex can be used as a manipulation tactic. I believe people use it all the time in many different forms for many different reasons. But in my opinion, telling someone that you're in a solid relationship with, that you're thinking about having sex with somebody else is a big, fat no-no. And the only reason that someone would suggest something like that to their partner is to manipulate them or to assert dominance and control. It's a power play. That's my opinion. And nobody can tell me that Gypsy is stupid or she doesn't understand.
She told me that that was her final goodbye. And of course, I'm like, yeah, but you said that before. Do I worry? Yes. But at the same time, I don't. It's hard to explain because I trust her. You know, it might take her a week to tell me, but she'll tell me. I think Gypsy uses tests like that, conversation with Ken, to make sure that I'm going to stay around because she is scared that people will, like, that I will abandon her.
She's very calculated. She knows what she's doing. That's my opinion. Here's the text that says, "I found the flogger." And Nick responds, "That's good news. By the way, a flogger is a BDSM sex toy or tool or whatever you want to call it." I am well aware that Gypsy wrote a book and that in it, she describes how Nick forced her into all of this BDSM stuff. However, that's just her word. Until I see evidence of this, I can't believe her. All of the actual evidence that's floating around does not point to Nick being the way she describes. We also have to remember that she posted to Facebook while they were together what a wonderful guy he was. He was her Prince Charming. We have her interview with police talking about how he would never do something like that. He would never kill her mother. He's very kind.
I don't think he would ever hurt her. I mean, he's very sweet. He's very kind.
And then we also have video after the murder. Directly after the murder, there is CCTV images of her laughing, being flirty, smiling, and then, of course, the hotel room video. Now, does Nick look like he's in control of anything? I don't remember if I touched on this or not in my last video, but it was very clear to me that Nick is pretty hypersexual, which is not at all uncommon with children or adults on the spectrum, but it is possible that Gypsy is even more hypersexual than Nick, and we see it even today. I mean, it takes a lot of balls to post something like Gypsy posted, where millions of people are gonna see it, about your sex life with your husband. It's just not normal behavior. Gypsy, in my opinion, uses sex to keep men interested and to keep men doing what she wants them to do. It doesn't surprise me at all that people were asking her to work at strip clubs or to start an OnlyFans, because clearly she is comfortable with sex and using sex to gain things. That's just my opinion. I wonder how many of you heard about the post that Gypsy made with her underage cousin that caused quite a stir, to the point where this kid had to shut down all of his social media. Within minutes of Gypsy posting this, people had figured out where this kid went to school, where he lived. They were harassing him, blowing up all of his inboxes and DMs, and sexualizing him. And he's a minor, 15 years old. I mean, why does it always have to be about relationships with Gypsy? That poor boy did not need any of the toxicity that she introduced him to. And many people can say, well, she doesn't know any better. Why did Gypsy Rose get away with that? Let me tell you something. If any other person with a significant amount of followers put their underaged family member on the internet for dating purposes, they would be canceled in a heartbeat. Let's move on. This text message shows that Gypsy's still telling Nick she's being abused, basically up until the murder. You know, just keeping that narrative going in case Nick may be having any second thoughts. This text message is from June 8th, where Nick texts, "Hi, sweetheart. Just wanted to say I'm missing you, and also that I love, adore, and worship you, my everything," which seems to be their phrase. You know, couples sometimes have a phrase that seems to be theirs. They use it a few times in these text messages. Then Gypsy responds, "Darling, I'm so sorry I didn't say goodnight. I was made to sleep on the front porch with bugs. I peed in the bushes. It's been rough." I don't know about you guys. I don't believe she was made to sleep on the porch. That's one thing I never believed when I read this text, even back when I believed a lot of what came out of Gypsy's mouth. And this brings me back to Fancy Maselli and some of the theories that she and her team have come up with based on what's come out of Gypsy's mouth. We've all heard it. We've all heard the narrative that she was kicked out. She says it in her interrogation video.
And then she just said, "Well, if you want to go, go." I guess out of love she did that. Because she wanted me to be happy.
Nick is talking about it with his friend all the way up until the day of the murders that she's being kicked out. And then he says in this Facebook message, which we've already gone over, but she saved it because she still had packing to do. It could be possible that she was made to sleep out on the porch with bugs, but that's because she asked to go, and her mom may have, in fact, kicked her out. But she had nowhere to go yet because Nick wasn't there yet. This all shows she had options, right? Because if she was made to sleep outside on the porch with bugs and peeing in bushes, she was free at that point. Her mom kicked her outside and put her on the porch. She didn't say she was chained to the porch. She didn't say she was locked in that shed, which we're going to get into in a different video. She said she was made to sleep on the porch. So she was free at that point, before Nick even got there. But she wasn't ready to go yet. She needed to get her stuff. You see? Let's keep going. And then she is giving Nick information about passwords. So I don't know what for, but here you can see she is the one who holds the passwords. This text message, Gypsy says, "The good thing is, if you forgot it, at least you have write your confirmation number down and the card it was purchased with, hun. They can look that up. These messages all show Nick could not have done any of this without Gypsy. Nick says, okay, baby, I was hoping you would have said our sacred words, which is that, you know, that phrase that they use, I love and worship you or whatever. And that's where I see that it's way more important for Nick to have Gypsy's love and affection, where all she seems to care much about is this plan. Here, he says, dear, look at your email. I need to know the reference number. And a lot of these messages after are him just kind of going through what he's doing, you know, him on his way to her. Now I'm in Chicago, now I'm here, now I'm there. All of the messages from Gypsy are her being very excited, like this one, making up a song on the road to destiny, la la la. And then she goes and asks this question, which I find to be very ironic considering what they are about to do. She asks, is Big Bend a safe place to live? Then there's this text. You might think I'm spoiled by how my room looks, a closet full of name brand clothes. Yet she's so abused. She's sleeping on a porch and peeing in bushes. Now, I certainly don't want to come across as someone who doesn't understand that you can be spoiled rotten and still be abused. We can talk about the Menendez brothers. If you don't know who they are, they killed their parents and they are serving life for it. They were extremely spoiled, but there's a lot of alleged abuse that went on at the hands of their parents that they say caused them to reach a breaking point and caused them to do what they did. Now, the moment many of you have been waiting for, let's talk about Fancy Maselli. For those of you who don't know, she has a channel called The Good Wives Network. She has been digging into this case since almost the beginning. She has tons of information that the public doesn't have and a team behind her of professionals and specialists that have helped her get to the truth. She has spent infinite amounts of time with the families, both Rod and Dee Dee's side, and she has also obtained all of the medical records for Gypsy.
All right, guys, you say I don't have what I have. Well, I got what I have. You want to see it? Here it is. Let's start. Let me see. Let me open which one this one is. That's 2005, age 14. You want to see it? There it is. Here they are. I have them all. That's all the way to, let's see. This binder here holds 2005, 2006, 2007. This is, oh, and 2008. This is from 2009 and 2010, folks. There's some more. You want to see it? Right there. There it is. One more. 2011 to 2015. I want you to notice something that happens right around 2012, my friends. That's all there is anymore. Little tiny bits. So
I will link her channel in the description box below. She also has a TikTok. I cannot possibly get into everything that this woman has found in one video or even several videos. And there would be no point for me to, because she's very transparent. She is the source and you go to the source, right? But I did want to talk about a few things. Some of the bigger claims that Fancy has made that have caused people to change their opinion on what they believe when it comes to this case. Everything I'm about to say is my understanding of the story as Fancy Maselli has told it many times on multiple platforms, including her own. It all started with Fancy just being interested in the case. And she covers a lot of true crime cases, and this just happened to be one of them. She wanted to do a series very much like what we saw with the Hulu series titled The Act, but this was 7 years ago. This was long before we had The Act. So she reached out to Christy, Gypsy's stepmom, and Christy responded. And from there, she built a relationship with Christy and Gypsy and the whole entire family. Fancy is one of those people that wants to get to the truth, and she says she told them she's going to follow the truth. And if she ever felt that the truth was not coming out within this story, that she would no longer work with them. And long story short, that's kind of what ended up happening. She started finding out information that did not go along with the narrative that they wanted the public to hear. Fancy spent infinite hours speaking to both sides of the family, and she fairly quickly began to find inconsistencies. One of the biggest inconsistencies she found was with the story of Dee Dee having Munchausen's Syndrome by Proxy. While Dee Dee appeared to show signs of MSP, as I stated in my last video, she was never diagnosed with it while she was alive. I also said that unlike people with MSP, Dee Dee seemed to profit immensely for the medical issues that Gypsy Rose had. It wasn't just about attention for Dee Dee, it was about financial gain, and that is what makes Dee Dee different. According to Gypsy's medical files, Fancy has come to the understanding that many of the medical procedures Gypsy had done while under Dee Dee's care were necessary procedures. And she has had a nurse that she works with look over all of these medical records, and there are lots of videos on her YouTube channel. I know she also has a Patreon that probably shares even more in-depth things that YouTube doesn't really allow. Now, these procedures were minimally invasive, but still, they were surgical procedures nonetheless. And I don't know about you guys, but if I don't actually need a surgery, then I'm not going to sign up to get it. There is one medical procedure that was not necessary for certain, and it was probably one of the more painful medical procedures Gypsy had done, depending on who you ask that's had the procedure done, which there is proof of her having it done. And that is the muscle biopsy that was to check for muscular dystrophy, which we also know she did not need. You know what? Let's learn about what the testing for muscular dystrophy is like together real quick. Feel free to skip ahead if you want. This is information from the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. So the first step in diagnosing muscular dystrophy is a visit with a healthcare provider for a physical exam. The doctor will ask a series of questions about the person, family history, including whether or not there are any family members with muscular dystrophy, and medical history, such as muscular problems the person may be experiencing. There are several different tests that can help healthcare providers diagnose muscular dystrophy and determine which type of muscular dystrophy is present. The next step would be to run blood tests to measure levels of certain substances that may be high in someone with muscular dystrophy. They will also perform genetic testing, neurological testing, heart testing, imaging tests, and exercise assessments. But the most invasive test would be a muscle biopsy, which involves the removal of a piece of muscle tissue using a needle or a small incision. Providers examine the tissue under a microscope to check for hallmarks of muscular dystrophy. Patients diagnosed by muscle biopsy usually need genetic testing as well to confirm mutations in their genes. A muscle biopsy involves removal of a plug of tissue, usually by a needle, to be later used for examination. Sometimes more than one needle insertion may be needed to obtain a large enough specimen. Open biopsy involves a small incision through the skin and into the muscle so that a sample of muscle tissue can be removed from the affected area. This procedure is usually done while you're awake, and the healthcare provider will apply a numbing medicine or local anesthesia to the biopsy area. A needle biopsy involves inserting a needle into the muscle. When the needle is removed, a small piece of tissue remains in the needle. More than one sample stick might be needed to get a large enough sample. And I don't think she had an open biopsy. I don't know for sure, but that would have involved making a small cut in the skin, just as I said earlier, and into the muscle. The muscle tissue is then removed, and then the tissue is sent to a lab for further examination. During the biopsy, it says here, there is usually little to no discomfort. You may feel some pressure or tugging. The anesthetic may burn or sting when injected before the area becomes numb. After the anesthetic wears off, the area may be sore for about a week. Risks are minimal, but they may include bleeding, bruising, damage to the muscle tissue or other tissues in the area, infection, obviously, because there's always a slight risk anytime the skin's broken. So it sounds pretty simple, but at the end of the day, Gypsy did not need it. She never needed it, and Dee Dee knew that. Also, people have different experiences with a muscle biopsy. Some people describe the pain as agonizing, while others say it's not so bad. But like I just said earlier, if I don't need to have a biopsy, I certainly wouldn't elect to just have one done. And Gypsy did not need this procedure. Personally, I've never had a muscle biopsy done, but I have had biopsies done, and one was certainly far more painful than the other, and I would never want to do it for no reason whatsoever. That's for damn sure. And of course, the results came back as negative for muscular dystrophy. The doctor that performed this test on Gypsy was the only doctor who became suspicious of DEE DEE. He noticed right away that Gypsy had muscle use in her legs. He even brought up Munchausens Syndrome By Proxy in his medical notes, but he never went any further with his findings. The only other mildly invasive procedure Gypsy had that we know of, there's no record for, and that is the placement of the feeding tube, which Fancy believes was probably never even used. And while the feeding tube was quote-unquote minimally invasive, again, it's something else that Gypsy didn't need. And again, I'll ask you, if you didn't need to have a feeding tube inserted in your stomach, would you get one? I know Fancy believes that she probably didn't need it at some point, or that they were able to convince a doctor that she needed it at some point. But Fancy also believes that it was never used much after that. It was for show. It was like a prop in their act. The process of the procedure for a feeding tube is that an endoscope, which is a flexible tube with a camera and a light at the end, goes into your mouth, down into your stomach to find a spot for the tube placement. The skin on the outside is numbed and a special needle is put through the skin into the stomach. They then use wires or other devices to put the tube in. This is all done under general anesthesia, and complication rates are about 10 to 15% for at least one complication. Those complications would be medication reaction, infection, fever, bleeding, a hole in the wall of the esophagus, stomach, or colon, or that the procedure ends up being canceled due to a safe place to put it not being found. After placement, you'll be pretty sore, and then of course you have to clean it a few times a day to keep it from getting an infection. My point is, if you need a feeding tube, it's not a huge procedure or a huge inconvenience. It's medically necessary, and it's certainly not one of the worst things you can have done. But imagine if you don't need it. This is where I find it hard to omit medical abuse in this case. Not to mention that Gypsy had to go to the ER to have it cleaned out due to infections several times while she had it in place. Whether or not you believe DEE DEE had Munchausen Syndrome By Proxy or was just a straight up con artist doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Whether or not you believe Gypsy Rose Blanchard was medically abused by her mother, again, really doesn't matter anymore at the end of the day. Not to me personally. What matters to me is that there is a young man sitting in prison for the rest of his life with no eligibility of rehabilitation or parole that no one is even listening to. It's like they forgot about him. It's as if no one cares about Nicholas Godejohn at all. While the person responsible for putting him in jail, the person who groomed him, manipulated him, the person who sought him out to commit this heinous crime is out running the streets like some kind of hero or role model.
Because it's always in my comments. Like, why are we glorifying a murderer and this and that and the other? And, I don't want to have to remind people every single time that I'm not the one that committed the act of the kill. So, I'm a part of it.
Right.
Had I been in another state, I would have been charged with accessory to commit murder.
I'm on a high right now. I'm living my best life, and y'all can't take that from me. Y'all can't take that from me.
And the D is
fire.
Yes, I know. At the end of the day, Nick committed the act of the kill. However, he never would have without Gypsy. He couldn't have without Gypsy. And the only thing Gypsy has to say about Nicholas Godejohn is that she can't stand him.
What do you think should happen to Nick?
I think he should spend the rest of his life in prison. I think he used me to have his own means. He was a lonely person, not a lot of friends. Girls would never look at him. I can't stand him. Because I went from one abusive person to another. I wish he would have been more responsible. He was the first person I ever told that I could walk. And yet I asked him a question. I asked him to kill my mother.
But I didn't hold a gun to his head and make him do it. He seemed more happy to do it than anything. And that's why I can't stand him, is because he knew. I think he knew that he could easily get me out of that situation by calling the police, being responsible.
That he is the cause of all of this. That he was abusive to her, a monster who wanted to commit this quote-unquote act so intensely, even though all of the evidence points to the contrary. Is that justice? In my opinion, no. Now, there has been mention of overkill. Nicholas Godejohn was adamant in his police interrogation that he only stabbed Dee Dee 4 times. However, Dee Dee's autopsy allegedly showed 17 stab wounds.
Do you know how many times you stabbed her?
4.
You stabbed her 4?
Yeah, 4 times.
Okay. And so, you only stabbed her 4 times? Are you sure about that?
Well, as in stabbing, I stabbed her 4 times.
Okay.
But I did actually cut her one other time besides that.
Okay, where'd you cut her at?
On the back of her neck.
Is there any reason that we would think that maybe you stabbed her more than 4 times?
Not that I'm aware of.
If there were 17 stab wounds, how are we so confident that Nick is the only one who stabbed her? He did say, however, Gypsy never went into the room to see her mother. He was adamant that he was the only one who stabbed her.
Okay. Now, did Gypsy come in and stab her?
No.
Gypsy never stabbed her?
She couldn't do it. Okay. That's the reason why she asked me to.
Okay. Did you try to get Gypsy to come in and stab her?
No, I would have never done that.
And I do have to say that there's plenty of evidence that shows that crimes of passion victims can show signs of overkill. The perpetrator is so lost in the rage that they almost black out and probably couldn't accurately tell you how many times they stabbed someone or fired the weapon or beat the person with a blunt force object.
Do you know where those 4 deep ones were?
I honestly can't remember because I think it's just a blockage because of the guilt.
Okay.
I can't
remember. That you might not remember, and I understand that because in the situation.
But I do know that the overkill aspect of this case is what a lot of people are holding against Nicholas Godejohn. However, remember in my last video, I talked about how there were other plans, that murder was not the only plan. One of the other plans was to either fake a pregnancy or to actually get Gypsy pregnant. Nick talks about this in his interrogation and in other interviews that he's done. Now, this is all alleged, what I'm about to say, and neither one of them have ever admitted to this. However, there is an allegation that Gypsy told Nick that she was pregnant by him, but that she lost the baby because of her feeding tube. Of course, Gypsy blamed the loss of this pregnancy on her mother. And this may or may not have been Nick's breaking point to finally giving in and saying, that bitch is dead. Now again, I said, this is alleged and I'm foggy on the details. I want to look more into it. But if this were true, in my opinion, that could certainly explain the overkill. And now I'm just realizing how long this video is getting. I never do anything small, I swear. I always end up all in, and there are so many more points I want to make and more things I want to bring to light that I believe are important to talk about, but I don't want the video to be so long that you guys start clicking off because you're sick of my voice. So I'm going to end this video now, and I will start working on the next one once this one's uploaded. Please be safe, be healthy, be happy, and most of all, be unapologetically you. Bye-bye.